While everyone else ran, the maid pulled the Mafia boss out of the burning building and shocked them all. A true story. Nobody noticed Rosa when she walked into a room. That was simply how things were, and she had stopped minding it a long time ago. She was a small woman with tired eyes and strong hands, and she had spent 17 years cleaning other people's floors. She knew how to be invisible. She had, in fact, become very good at it. The Castellano estate sat behind tall stone walls on the edge of the city, surrounded by old cypress trees and the kind of silence that felt expensive. Inside those walls, men in dark suits came and went at strange hours. Conversations stopped when Rosa walked into a room. Nobody asked her questions, and she never asked any of her own. She cleaned the floors, polished the silverware, changed the linens, and went home. 6 days a week, for 17 years. She had 3 children, all grown now. She had a small apartment with a leaking kitchen tap that she kept meaning to fix. She liked strong coffee and quiet mornings, and she saved a small amount from every salary to send to her sister in the South. Her life was simple and honest, and she was proud of it, even if no one else ever thought to notice. The man who owned the estate was named Domenico Castellano. He was 58 years old and built like a wall. He had a broad face, heavy eyebrows, and eyes that did not soften easily. He had run his family's business for more than 20 years, and the people who worked for him, the guards, the drivers, the staff, all moved a little faster when they heard his footsteps in the hall. Rosa had heard stories about him, of course. Everyone in the city had. But in 17 years, he had never once spoken directly to her. She was simply part of the furniture to him. The woman who cleaned. That summer had been tense. Rosa could feel it without knowing the details. There were more men at the gate than usual. Phone calls happened in closed rooms with low voices. One evening she found a set of car keys left in the wrong drawer, and when she returned them to the estate manager, the man took them quickly and told her to forget she had seen them. She nodded and went back to her work. She was good at forgetting things that were not her business. She noticed the smell on a Tuesday. It was faint, coming from the corridor near the old storage wing at the back of the east side of the house. A dry, bitter smell, like something waiting to catch. She stood in that corridor for a moment, her mop in her hand, and breathed the air carefully. Then she walked to the guard sitting near the main staircase and told him about it. He was a large man with a thick neck, and he did not look up from his phone. "I am sure it is nothing," he said. Rosa looked at him for one extra second. Then she nodded and walked back to her work. *****. The fire started 2 nights later, at nearly midnight. Rosa was still in the house. She had stayed late to finish polishing the dining room silver, which was a task she liked to do when the house was quiet. She was in the linen corridor, putting fresh towels away, when she heard the first shout. Then another. Then the sharp, ugly smell hit her all at once, much stronger than before, and she understood immediately what it was. The corridor filled quickly. People ran past her, a cook, 2 groundskeepers, a young driver she recognized but did not know by name. The estate manager rushed past with his phone pressed to his ear, calling for the fire brigade. A guard jogged by, jacket off, not stopping. Nobody spoke to her. Nobody looked at her. They simply ran, and the human instinct behind it was not something she could blame. Fire does not give people time to think. Rosa stood still. She did not plan to stand still. Her body simply did not move in the direction of the door. Instead she stood there in the linen corridor and watched the faces streaming past her, and she counted them the way she had always counted things: towels, plates, chairs, glasses, quietly and carefully, out of long habit. She did not see Domenico Castellano. She stopped a guard who was moving fast toward the exit and grabbed his sleeve. "Where is Don Castellano?" she asked. The man looked at her as if the question did not make sense in that moment. Then he shook his head and kept moving. She asked again, louder, but he was already gone. Rosa stood in the corridor a little longer. The smoke was beginning to curl along the ceiling above her, thin and gray, like something cautious testing the air. The sound of the fire, that low, rolling sound, almost like breathing, was coming from the east wing. From the direction of the private study. She knew where the private study was. She had cleaned it every Thursday for 17 years. She knew which floorboard near the desk made a sound when you stepped on it. She knew the window on the far side had a latch that could be opened from inside without a key. She knew the staff door in the east antechamber, the one the family never used, which opened onto the north garden. She took a towel from the shelf beside her. She soaked it in the water from the bucket she had been using. She pressed it over her nose and mouth, and then she dropped to her knees on the floor where the air was still breathable, and she began to move toward the fire. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. The heat in that corridor was unlike anything she had felt before. It pressed against her skin like something physical, like a hand pushing her back. The smoke was thick and dark, and it stung her eyes so badly she could barely see. She kept her face close to the floor and moved by memory, because memory was all she had. Left past the old mirror. Straight along the back passage. Through the heavy door that swung to the right. She found him at his desk. He was slumped forward with his head down and his arms spread across the papers in front of him. He was not unconscious, but he was not fully aware either. The smoke had gotten to him before he had understood what was happening. His reading glasses were still on his face. Rosa reached him and put her hand on his arm. "Don Castellano," she said, close to his ear. "We have to go. Right now." He made a sound but did not move. She shook him, firmly, with both hands. "Sir. Now. Please." He lifted his head and looked at her, and for a moment she could see real confusion in his eyes, not fear, exactly, but the look of a man who could not understand what he was seeing. A small woman in an apron, kneeling beside him in a room full of smoke. "Can you hear me?" she said. "Nod if you can hear me." He nodded. "Good. We cannot walk upright. We go down. Follow my hands. Do not stop." Getting him to the floor took effort. He was a large man and his body did not cooperate the way a healthy, alert body would have. But he followed her direction. She guided his hands to her shoulder and began to move, and he moved with her, and that was enough. They went through the study door and into the corridor, and 15 seconds later a section of the ceiling behind them came down with a sound like a great, tired sigh. Burning pieces of wood hit the floor where they had just been. Rosa did not look back. She kept moving. Left at the broken radiator. Straight. Through the staff door. She found the window in the east antechamber and stood up long enough to reach the latch. Her hands were trembling and the metal was hot, but the latch opened. She swung the window wide and looked back at him. "Through here," she said. "I will help you." They came out into the north garden, both of them falling more than climbing through the window, landing on the cool grass on the outside of the building. Rosa sat up and breathed, just breathed, with her eyes closed and her burned hands pressed flat on the ground. The orange light from the fire painted the tops of the cypress trees. Domenico Castellano lay on his back beside her, looking up at the sky. He was coughing. His face was dark with soot. His reading glasses were somehow still on his face, one lens cracked. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. The firefighters arrived and found them there, on the north side of the building, the side where no one had gathered because no one had expected anyone to come from that direction. A young firefighter saw them first and called out to the others. Men came running across the grass with blankets and equipment. When the estate manager appeared around the corner of the building and saw Domenico Castellano sitting on the grass with Rosa beside him, he stopped walking completely. He stood there with his mouth open and said nothing. Behind him, 2 of the guards also stopped. Then more people appeared, drawn by the shouts of the firefighters, and they all stood in the cool night air and stared. Rosa accepted a blanket from a young paramedic. Her hands were already being wrapped. She looked at the faces around her, the guards, the staff, the men who had run, and none of them would meet her eyes. Domenico Castellano was helped to his feet. A paramedic put an oxygen mask over his face. He pushed it aside after a moment and looked at Rosa. He said 4 words to her. The people standing nearby heard them clearly. Nobody who was there that night ever forgot those 4 words, though most of them chose not to repeat them out of respect for the men who had said them. What they agreed on was this: the words were simple. Completely simple. And the way he said them made several of the hardest men there look at the ground. Rosa nodded once in response. Then she let the paramedic take her hands and continue wrapping them. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. The investigators confirmed 3 weeks later that the fire had been deliberate. An accelerant had been used in the old storage wing, the same corridor where Rosa had noticed the smell 2 days before. The same corridor where a guard had told her it was probably nothing. The intended result had almost been achieved. If Domenico Castellano had remained at his desk for another few minutes, he would not have survived. The investigation found that not a single member of the household staff or security team had confirmed his location before evacuating. Everyone had assumed someone else was handling it. Nobody was blamed publicly. These things, in that world, were handled privately. Rosa was not asked to speak to any journalists. She did not seek out any reporters herself. She returned to work the following Monday, as she had always done, arriving at 5:30 in the morning with her bag over her shoulder. The estate manager met her at the gate and seemed uncertain what to say to her. She smiled politely, walked past him, and went to find her mop. A journalist from a city newspaper did eventually reach her by telephone, 3 weeks after the fire. He asked her how she had found the courage to go back into the building when everyone else was leaving. She was quiet for a moment before she answered. "I was not brave," she said. "I was just the one who knew where the window was." The journalist wrote those words down and put them in his article, and they were the line that everyone remembered. People passed the article around. Strangers read it and felt something move in their chests without fully knowing why. A television reporter repeated the quote on the evening news. Her face appeared briefly on a screen in a shop window she walked past the following day, and she looked at it for a moment, confused, and then kept walking. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Domenico Castellano spent 4 days in the hospital. Rosa brought flowers on the 3rd day, paying for them herself from her own salary, as she would have done for anyone she worked for who was unwell. She set them on the table beside his bed, asked the nurse if there was anything he needed, and turned to leave. He stopped her. He said the 4 words again. She stood with her back to him for a moment after hearing them. Then she turned around, and for the first time in 17 years, she looked directly at him. Not as a person looks at an employer, but simply as one person looks at another. "You should rest," she said. "I will make sure the house is clean when you come home." She left. He watched the door after she closed it. No further conversation about what had happened between them was ever recorded. They did not become friends, exactly, because their worlds were too far apart for that. But something had changed in the architecture of the house. Rosa walked its corridors a little differently after that, not with pride, which was not her nature, but with the quiet certainty of a person who knows exactly who she is. The guards, she noticed, now looked at her when she walked past. Not with suspicion, as they sometimes had before. With something else. Something she did not have a name for, and did not need one. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Domenico Castellano died 4 years later, from a heart condition that had nothing to do with the fire. He was 62 years old. His affairs were in order, as the affairs of a careful man tend to be. Among his arrangements was a written provision, signed and witnessed in the final year of his life, specifying that Rosa Ferrante, referred to in the document by her full name, for the first time in any record connected to the estate, would continue to receive her full monthly salary for the remainder of her life, regardless of whether she continued to work. He left no explanation for this provision. None was given by his estate. None was asked for. Rosa continued to work. Not because she needed to, though the money certainly helped, but because she liked the work. She liked the quiet of the early morning. She liked the weight of clean linen in her hands. She liked the way a polished floor looked when the light came through the window and fell across it just right. She told her daughter, on the day the arrangement was explained to her, that she did not feel the provision was particularly remarkable. She had done what anyone with sense would have done, she said. She knew the layout. She knew the window. She simply went. Her daughter looked at her for a long time after she said this. "Mama," she said, "other people knew the layout too." Rosa considered this. Then she picked up her coffee cup and drank from it and said nothing more. Some things do not need to be explained. The right people already understand them. And the people who do not understand them probably never will, no matter how many words are used. Rosa Ferrante went to work the next morning, as she had done every morning for most of her adult life. She arrived at 5:30. She made herself a coffee in the kitchen. She picked up her mop. And the house, as always, was waiting to be cleaned. End.